Hello, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to my series of deep dialogues. These are vital conversations I engage in with global soul stewards from all over the planet, providing us with vital understandings about how we can create a new hierarchy of values to help us evolve into a brave new world. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Hey, welcome everybody. Namaste, namaste, namaste. Is there an equivalent in classical Judaism for namaste?
I would say shalom, it's
Shalom,
kind of
shalom,
like
shalom, shalom, everybody, because we have a
uh,
wonderful gentleman sitting here. This is Jacob L. Cooper, and the L stands for
Lieb or Lab, and
Eve.
that means translated to Hebrew, it's like kind of like the heart of the lion. Oh,
Lieb.
very powerful. Yeah,
In Yiddish, it's love.
love and heart. Yeah, but the
Yeah.
heart. Yeah,
Heart.
yeah.
The heart speaks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jacob Lieb Cooper. Cooper, it doesn't necessarily ring of Judaism, but never mind. We'll forgive him for that.
There's a story to my last name. It's not. It's like most. It's not the original. Yeah,
Indeed,
yeah.
indeed. I would imagine. Do I feel the resonance of Ellis Island suddenly popping in?
You
I
know the story. You know the drill. Yeah.
do. So let me just formally introduce you to this gentleman and why he's here. Jacob is passionate about promoting healing, and he is the best-selling author of Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, which of course, as you see, is the title of our deep dialogue. And he has become a much sought after speaker concerning the substance and essence of spirituality and consciousness. Jacob offers meditations and mindfulness seminars, helping all who attend to find a purpose and to overcome the fear of death. As a clinical social worker, Reiki Master, and Certified Hypnotherapist specializing in past life regression, Jacob uses his extensive personal and professional experience to empower all whom he meets. Welcome, Jacob. So, the
Thank you.
wisdom of Jacob's ladder, in a nutshell, can you spell
Yeah,
out?
absolutely. The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, is really a book that summarizes a lot of the understandings and insights from my own near death experience to be applied and integrated in this life. So, in a sense, you think of a ladder and you think of different rungs. That's the idea of the book. It's just different rungs and tenets of the understandings and insight of my NDE to be applied for this life so that we don't have to wait until we die, to have understanding of the afterlife, or that the afterlife doesn't have to be after this life, that we can live it right here, right now, in this life too. You know?
Beautiful, beautiful. And is there a connection with Jacob and his dream?
Yeah, so that was kind of like both of my books have a little bit of a play on words. Life After Breath was kind of like a homage to Raymond Moody's Life After Life, who coined the term NDE.
Mhm.
But Jacob is my name, and when you think of your name, at least, there's something to it. I think your name reveals your potential to a degree, or your essence to some degree in this lifetime, or your path. But Jacob, if you're familiar with, which was chased by his brother Esau, in Genesis, when over the covenant, and he was running for his life, and he slept in a place that is referred to now in Israel called Bet El. Bet meaning house, house means the Lord. So the house of God, the house of the Lord, and Jacob slept, by pillars of rocks, and he saw angels going up and down, the ladder. And then eventually he was able to wrestle, with kind of like the devil, whatever you want to call it, and his name became from Jacob transformed into Israel. But really, at least for me, there's so many parallels in my NDE and the ladder, in the name that we'll hopefully get into in the show, that
Mm.
I couldn't leave that out of a book title. You know?
Oh, no, indeed. I mean, it's so evocative. It's beautiful, and of course, what it does is, I'm not going to say I'm ashamed because I'm not ashamed, but I haven't got round to reading it. So it's something that I must do because it's highly evocative. And so you've given us the wonderful seed of NDE. Could you perhaps give us the identification of what your NDE experience was?
Yeah. It was September of 1993, and I was just the young age chronologically of 3 years old. And I went, to a playground with, family friends of mine. And, I was climbing up into a ladder onto a slide. And once I got on top of it, I just began to just suffocate. There was no ability to breathe. And that was, to this day, the most traumatizing, scariest moment of my life. I just was totally suffocated. And then, due to the deprivation of oxygen, each part of my body just began to stop working. It wasn't functioning. It's as if you go into a basement and you go and you just shut off the power breakers one at a time. That was occurring in my body, because without the breath, where is the body unless you're on a ventilator or some type of oxygen machine? And once my body wasn't working, I was able to feel myself leaving my body and was able to see myself outside of my body. So, as if you're in a car and you're trying to gun the engine, the car's not working, you're not going to hang out there in the driver's seat. You're going to check the hood and see like what's going on. And for me, I was able to look at my body and I was able to just see everything just kind of collapsing and not functioning. And the last part that I was able to feel and become aware of was my own brain. And I was able to see all the different parts of my brain, sections, and understanding at that time like what they were there for. And I probably had more awareness in that moment than most people who went to train in, neuroscience or stuff like that. But then I just felt my own brain, literally just kind of like slowly snapping in half, as if there was a large crack within my own brain due to the deprivation of oxygen. So
Mm.
it's kind of like I felt like you were plugged into this wall in this body and just yanked that plug. I just felt this large crack right in my brain. And as the saying goes, my brain cracked open. And that's when God and Spirit came in. And that literally happened to me. And I saw my own soul racing and elevating at some insane speed where there was no beginning, no middle, no end. I could describe it as if you've ever been into a fast car or a roller coaster going at like an insane speed where you just don't even feel a sense of time in your body. It's just something you can't even process. That was occurring to me. But this journey was a journey in the inner part of my own being, the depths of my being, to its core. And in those moments, I was able to have an awareness of a beautiful golden palace right to the right side of my brain. And now looking back and I understand the right side of our brain represents the creativity, the insight. The left side is the analytical. But I was able to see this beautiful palace to the right side of my brain. And it was so bright that I just almost had to shield myself from looking, into this light. But I was aware of beautiful sounds and harmonies. And I saw, angels in this beautiful palace. And to me, I don't like to use the word God because God has a religious sort of sense. But to me, this was the center of all that ever is and ever was, where everything emanates from, comes from, is connected to, the ultimate source of life itself. And that's what I was seeing. And the best way I could feel or describe this was euphoria that had no end, a
Mm.
love that had no end. And in this life, we're used to, going to restaurants and having a good food or dish or conversation, but there's almost a limit with how high our spirits could feel in this body. But when I was there was no limit to how much
Mm.
beauty I was seeing or feeling or how euphoric I was in. There was no limitations.
Mm.
And for the limited mind to understand that, it's difficult because its nature is within limitation. But this is an unlimited part of my higher soul, my higher mind. And moments later, I began to become fearful. What would my life would look like? What would I physically look like? Why am I here? What would happen to my parents? I'm just 3 years old. What's the other side of my story? What is this life about? I'm not ready to leave this early. And then in moments later, I just felt this kind of whisper or just this beautiful harmony and sound on the other side, this piercing, like highest possible octave of the universe. And this sound was a familiar energy, but the best way I could describe it was a Christ consciousness. And it was not that Jesus himself came in front of me. It was just this high vibrational whisper and energy on the other side. And in that moment, I was enveloped in an unconditional love where I wasn't looked down on or in judgment, but I was looked up at. And I was felt with a clarity and an exhalation that all is well, was well, and will be well. And there was no time of this, and there was no place to run to need to do something or be somewhere. I was just in this place of timeless, unconditional love and beauty where all is well, and there's nothing else to be experienced. This was the ultimate truth. And moments later, I was able to feel my body transition onto the ground from the slide, and I was able to feel and see my own two primary spirit guides, which was a male and female guide. And when I looked at them, it wasn't like a telepathic thought or something that you could imagine. They were literally right to the right side and left side of me. And I just felt a sense of embarrassment. I felt not from them, but from myself. Like, how could I forget that these
Oh, I see.
beautiful spiritual guides were with me every step of this journey? And even at the age of 3, I kind of got caught up in the illusion of being human, that this was just an experience. It wasn't the full totality of the picture or the panoramic picture. There was so much inside of us, and that this life was not just a random occurrence. We come from a beautiful place as spiritual beings having this experience. But when I saw my guides, I can't tell you how beautiful they were. And I just knew in my core who they were. And I felt a sense of joy and jubilation at seeing and being with them. And then I was able to see my body just on the ground, and all the people that went to the playground were calling my name. And I was able to see them. You see, my body was on the ground, but my form was to the side of my body. And so they were looking at my body, and I just knew that wasn't who I was. That was just an instrument. And I was just trying to grab them to say, I'm okay, I'm right here. But they couldn't see me, and I could see them. And that was something that probably lasted for a couple decades of my life, where I wasn't really seen for who I was, but what I was, on the surface. And I was looking at all the participants, and I was able to see their auric fields, and it was just beautiful, magnificent. And I was able to know their hearts, their thoughts, who they were at their core. And it was just beautiful to see all as just a part of this spiritual phyla, the spiritual fabric that we all are a part of. That in this life, where we think of someone associated with spirituality or someone who's spiritual, but at our core, much like when you squeeze out an orange, you just get orange juice. When you squeeze out ourselves, it's pure spirit. That's who we are, where we come from. And then I just looked up, and right around me, all around me, were hundreds and thousands of angels floating in the air right in front of me. And these angels were kind of like a bronze type color, like a bronze gold color. And they were very youthful, very young in the presentation. I could hear the vibrations. I could hear, their sounds. Different than the spirit guides, the angels that I was seeing, they were more uniformal. They were more kind of the same, where the spirit guides had different characteristics from another. But they were uniformal in one sense. They were just here to send love, to send warmth, to send healing without expecting anything in return. There was no sense of identity, but just to be a servant of love. And I just almost had to pinch myself because I was looking right at them. I'm like, this is, do crossover. There's an incubational period. It's not just like you're there and that's it. Two things could be true at the same time, where a part of you remembers and then a part of your human side is getting adjusted to the spirit world. And then, I was able to see my entire soul family that, if you kind of like, I run some meditations like this, but if you ever at a beach and just kind of visualize at the shoreline, people just walking up to you,
Hmm.
from the shoreline in a big group, that's what happened to me. And I just felt a sense of reunion with my team. And I use the term soul family, but in reality, we all are a part of this soul family. But by soul family, it's the stage that we're on. We have different parts, different roles, but we all are a part of the ray of God. It's just like a similar expression of divinity and a similar place that each soul family member connects to. That's a similar expression of the divine. And they group together to really elevate that ray of light and express it. Um,
Mm.
and then moments later, I was posed the most difficult question of my life to this day, which is, Jacob, what will you do? What will you do? There was autonomy. Will I continue to evolve and work and live in the other side? Or would I live out my life as 3-year-old Jacob? And I honestly did not know what to say. They both seemed like decent options. I didn't know where to turn. I knew I would be okay either way that I went to for myself. But I said, what is this life about? Why am I here? What is the story of this? And then moments, I was able to have something that a lot of NDEers have, which is called a review of life or a life review, which is kind of like a movie of your life, but it's a movie that you experience through a multitude of angles, your own angle, but also the understanding of the people around you. And it's not always bad. It could be the beauty that you are and what you meant to everyone around you. And sometimes we forget how significant we are to the world around us. But this life review did not just stop at this life, it transcended this life. And I had other, what we call past life reviews of other different lifetimes that were closely related to this lifetime. And I hope throughout the show, maybe I could get into one particular lifetime as it's very much in parallel with why I believe I had an NDE.
Mm.
But then
I was about to come to that question because as you come into the life review, this is a 3-year-old consciousness that is perceiving all of this, and of course, it's now in your the years that you found a way of articulating all of this perception. The perception that your 3-year-old had was based on sensation and a higher level of cognizance, because you're articulating it through a great deal of thought. And so, is there a response to that? What was your 3-year-old feeling? How was he processing?
mm, well, this is going to sound very complicated to listeners, and it's a question that I'm
Make
posed.
it simple, Jacob. Make it simple.
Yeah. What I'll say is, we are not what we think we are.
Hmm.
We are not our names, our chronological ages,
Hmm.
our temporary moments in our life. We experience those things, but that's not the full totality of who we are. We are the eternal experiencer of life itself.
Hmm.
And so the soul has no chronological age.
Hmm.
It experiences itself, through different forms and different stages of our life. But
Hmm.
ultimately, beyond that is a consciousness. And so two things could be true at the same time. There was a part of myself that was still attached to that ethereal life, but then the depth of my experience when I was going able to go in deeper and deeper, that was my soul, which transcended, linear time, linear age, and attachment to what I was in that life. And that's hard to grapple around, but that's
Not
the
at all. It's not hard at
yeah,
all. Not at all. I'm sure we
yeah.
grasp it. So impactfully, you were actually embraced by the mind of God. And the fact that you were 3 years of age had nothing to do with the experience. The 3 years of age was merely a filtered perspective of your humanness. But actually, you were being informed by the richness, by the wonder, by the nourishment, by the nectar, by the shekinah of what the mind of God is all about. Is that right?
It was a recollection of that and just reunion it was a
There was
reunion.
there was a communion going on,
Yeah,
Jacob,
yeah,
right? That's
yeah,
what you're talking about.
it's
And
coming
so
home.
maybe a recollection, but it was actually happening. I mean, there was no a recollection is a time word. You were right in the moment
Yes.
experiencing
Yeah, yeah,
extraordinary nectar. Okay, cool. Can we just go back to the bronze-looking angels?
yeah.
The collective bronze, did they have faces? Did they have bodies? Did they have wings? How were they?
All of the above. You answered it for yes, the all of the above, and they were floating very peacefully
Yeah,
right in my vision,
yeah.
all
And
around me.
and were their faces identifiable, meaning your face is your face, my face is my face. We can't see Ryan, he's in the background, but his face is his face. Were they unique or were they actually collectivized?
Collectivized, they were all very, very similar, you
I
know.
see.
There wasn't a degree of separation, where the
Yeah.
faces of the spirit guides were unique, the
And
faces
who
of the
who
angels
were
were
the
very
spirit guides?
well, the spirit guides, were, to me, these are beings that we choose, and they choose us before we get here to this
Yeah.
life in the pre-planning phases, and
So
they
who
are beings to me, they're the closest core of who you are, you know,
okay.
and you're almost like your higher self. But when I was looking at the spirit guides, it just one part of me was just like imagine the person in your life that you
Mhm.
most look up to, that you most admire, that you have just an incredible degree of admiration for,
Mhm.
and just kind of like other that person, like that's them and this is me.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how I felt when I saw my spirit guides. In one sense, I felt a degree of closeness
Mhm.
to them, but the other sense, I'm like, it was just almost like an intimidation. Like, oh my God, these beings are with me this entire journey, and that was, just again my ego. Right, that was it. But
Right.
but
May I just compliment that and
sure,
say maybe you were not intimidated, but you were in awe?
I was in awe. Yeah,
You're in awe. Because intimidation suggests a certain amount of ferocity and violence,
right.
whereas being in awe is this just evidently you were feeling this extraordinary communion with the familiarity of who they were, but at the same time, their augustness, their majesty, the
Mm,
vastness of their intelligence, which is fascinating, isn't it? Because it
mm,
moves into the realms of consciousness that we humans experience, particularly from a spatial point of view. And the 2 to 3 year old is really beginning to examine that, so that we get clear pictures in our heads of what you were actually seeing. It certainly satisfies me because I've
mm,
always seen the multidimensional universe. So the angels that I now communicate with, the 12 angels of Atlantis, I saw them as lights when I was
mm,
very, 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 very young. But they were always part of this wonderful, awesome field of wonder. But at the same time, there was an intelligence that was communicating with me that was immensely familiar, but august, majestic,
yeah.
somehow part of me, but also somehow bigger than me. So I'm trying to find a way of relating to what you're saying. This is extraordinary. And so back to the life review. Were there particular themes that you were aware of?
Well, most particularly, my last life had a lot of um, relationship to my NDE and the current work that I'm doing. In my last life, when I had the review, I began to see, and I
Yeah,
was a teacher in this life, I began to see the different students of that
right.
life just kind of come to me on the other side. And I did feel a sense of emotion. I felt a sense of connection to these
Mm,
students. But in that last lifetime, I'm not going to use the word commit, because that means you made a crime. You don't commit a heart attack. You don't commit cancer, and I equate mental health with physical health. I don't see any difference. But, I had a death by suicide of that lifetime. And in that lifetime, I just remember just being cornered. There wasn't any hope. There wasn't any way that I saw myself out of that situation. And I just felt totally cornered. And that's, when I took my life. And when I crossed over, there was no judgment. There was just pure love. And I remembered crossing over. And I just understood the parallels with the NDE, how in the moment of my NDE, when I was suffocating, I felt completely cornered. I felt there was no hope. I felt this was it. And it was just the darkest, most traumatizing, scariest moment of my life. But what changed or altered, my trajectory was the ability to surrender. And sometimes we just hold on to pain. And if we let go to a higher power, a higher love inside of us, that could transcend even death itself. And I'm living the living embodiment of that, and that's driven me to the work that I do in many ways. But
And
the
so,
ability
if
to
you, this is
surrender.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that bit. I mean, all of it, but just that bit. And
Thanks.
so, back to the theme, so that we can anchor our consciousness in the extraordinary nature of your story. The theme would be one of reconciliation, of yielding to the higher power,
Mm,
because the substantial fear that you speak of, we can relate to because many of us have fear of death. And therefore, we go into fear, we go into frighteningness, we go into horror, etc., etc. And that was purely and simply to do with the bizarre chemistry of humanness in your 3-year-old body, moving through the varying waves or veils of consciousness between the lower and the higher vibrations,
mm,
presumably, which brought about the themes of, now I know what I'm going to actually spend my life doing. I will not assassinate myself in this life. I will actually yield to the extraordinary power of the divine, and the divine will move through me. Is that correct?
yes, yes. And it's a transformation from fear to love,
Yeah,
which is a miracle. And
yeah,
so the NDE
yeah,
was that miracle, but understanding that there was a purpose, that we're not just, sometimes when we struggle so badly, we get disconnected from the
yes.
purpose. And I always say, where your greatest pain is oftentimes your purpose in life. Those things that once,
Okay.
were really difficult and dark for you are there in your path for you to transcend on an inner level so that
Yeah,
you could have a ripple effect to
yeah,
others and relate to others and
yeah.
their journeys. Um, but yes, it brought me a recollection of a gear that was real and something that was just
Yes,
temporary in its existence.
yes. And so, bearing in mind that you have now evolved into this role of
Mm.
spiritual teacher and helping large groups of people individually through great processes of healing, is there a pinnacle point of truth that is a theme within your consciousness that you know was granted you through the life review about the teacher who committed suicide?
Yeah. Well, I would say, to me, the big theme in the work that I do is to give back what I was given. I was given
What do we call that in human terms?
in human terms to be of service. It's someone.
Well, on a deeper feeling level is really what I mean. I mean, that's beautiful. It's the charity, and but it feels as though there's a remarkable generosity.
Mm, yes, I that's a beautiful word. Being generous, being a giver,
Mm,
and a lot of people they try to find God. They try to find God through books or they travel thousands of miles away from themselves. But I think if you're being of service, you're not only finding God, but you're embodying God.
mm,
Because to me, God is the giver of life and the ultimate source of service.
mm,
And
mm,
that's what this life and the life that I live is all about. And there's two different paths that you could take, and some people vacillate between the two of being a giver and being a taker.
Mm,
And for years, I was just a taker of this experience. I didn't have a platform to give it over. And once I started to give over my experience, I saw the beauty that it had, that it wasn't just about me. None of life really is. It's about what you're able to understand and pass over to someone else.
mm,
And we think of spirit guides as just kind of out there, but many spirit guides were also, I believe, human too at a certain point. Some were. Some never lived in this earth, whatever, but I think some are. But to me, this life is an opportunity to learn what it's like to be a guide, to learn how to have unconditional love, nurturing acceptance. It's a school to be an angel, to be a guide.
yeah,
And when
yeah,
you're walking in harmony with spirit, it's a training ground for the soul,
yes.
once you transition over there.
Amazing, amazing. I have another question, but I really want to get back to the finality of
Sure.
the story, not that the finality of the story is really a finality. How did your 3-year-old then recover, in the sense of the fact that he'd gone through this deeply traumatic experience, just so that we have completion to that aspect of the story? But before we go there, I just wanted to ask you a question. What was the trigger that brought about a greater recognition within you of taking and giving?
Like, the trigger, I think, was going through my own pain that I experienced after having this NDE and the complexity that I had, and we could get into it. And it was a lot of inner child work. When I speak to others, it's almost kind of like speaking to that scared child. And that's the inner healing that goes, and
Right.
you're able to relate to others. But why I do what I do is within my NDE, like I mentioned, I was given an option of staying or going. But not
Mm.
only did I see, what happened in the what we call the past, but what I would be doing in the future. I saw myself speaking in front of crowds of people and a lot of different faces. And this wasn't anything pompous, like I was something better than or whatever.
We
It was
didn't perceive it as such.
no, there wasn't. I
Let
no,
let that go. Just stay with the purity of the story. The
yeah,
re the reassurance must have been extraordinary.
yes, but it was just everyone being one with this energy. And I was looking at the eyes of people, and I just saw that everyone was one with this energy. And that was, I said, wow, the other side is beautiful, but this window, to help out others and to give some of this back to others makes the afterlife not after this life, but it could be in this life,
Yeah.
you know,
So
when
it all
people
becomes
remember.
extraordinary. Thank you for sharing that. And then back to the little boy. So then suddenly there he was looking up at all these faces saying, "Are you breathing? Are you breathing?" Or whatever, whatever
Uh,
the drama was that was going on. That's just purely the story. But of going into the elemental consciousness of the experience is, I feel, really significant because we can then all relate to it rather than it just being a story. It, what
oh,
what
absolutely.
what was it like when you began to come back to human consciousness?
It was a very big contrast. I'd love to say it was rosy and wonderful, but it was a fall from grace in many ways. I was on this incredible euphoria, and I just woke up in a hospital bed, and the hardest part,
Mm,
Stuart, was, that experience of suffocation I described in my NDE,
mm,
that nearly lasted me almost 2 decades until I was able to articulate the
mm,
experience. And so
mm.
I had so much anger and pent-up frustration because I wanted to express what happened to me, but there weren't justifiable words, and I couldn't do it. I'm my own biggest skeptic of this stuff, but I spoke to my father, a couple of years ago, and he like recently, and he said, after you had your experience, a couple of years after that, you came up to me and you said, "Hey, Dad, remember when I was rushed by the ambulance to the hospital? Something happened to me that day. One day it will make sense to you, but it's not going to make sense to you right now. But one day you'll understand what happened to me." And that to me is just confirmation, that this was real. This wasn't just
Mm.
something that I imagined, like a lot of the stuff.
Mm.
But there was a great deal of trauma. My mother told me that a couple days after my NDE, I literally kicked my doctor in the leg because I was so angry. Um, because in a way, it was like coming from the other side, and now you're back in a hospital bed and you're not able to express yourself. So I had all this pent
Yes.
up trauma and emotion that I just kind of exploded.
Yes.
It.
And that's what I was intrigued by earlier about 10 beats back when I was asking you about the articulation of
Mhm,
this extraordinary process. And so, understandably, that there would be frustration, irritation,
mhm,
anger, and maybe even rage within your 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old self of trying to assimilate the vastness of what you were going through. Anyway, so you've dug into all of that and you've forgiven yourself and you've healed that, meaning moved those
mhm,
fractured parts back into wholeness.
mhm,
This is extraordinary. And as you step forward into the breadth and the depth of the work that you now
mhm,
um, allow us to participate in,
mhm.
um, deep in your hypnotherapeutic work, deep in your regression work, do you feel that you're able to perceive intuitively or psychically a meeting point between spirit and flesh to help the people that you're working with, your clients, your dear ones?
Yes, not only as a hypnotherapist, but also a therapist. Um, I call it, in a way, clinical intuition. It's more the medical term
Yeah.
for it. You're walking that tightrope. But it's interesting you bring up hypnosis. I really got into hypnotherapy. Anything that I do is because of my NDE, really. I give back what I was given. But,
Yes.
I understood the brain as not a producer of life, but a
Yeah.
filter of life. And my brain literally was not working and snapped in half. And that's when everything opened up.
Yes.
And so I understood hypnosis and meditation in particular as a way to get into those deeper hypnoidal states or those deeper states in the brain where people could be a clear filter of the
Mm.
two worlds and not just a producer or an analyzer of
Mm.
a limited world. And again, that's about giving back, the gifts that was given. And I love
Mm.
that Picasso quote that the meaning of life is to find your purpose, and the gift of it is to give it away, or something like that. The purpose of it is to give it away. And
Mm.
I it took me a long time to understand this as a gift, because throughout the majority of my childhood and teenage years, this was more of a curse than anything else. It wasn't a gift to me.
And it was a curse because of.
Well, being different than other people, you know, is hard. And growing up, you know, after my NDE, I was just kind of brought back into this world, and you're able to see through it. And I just knew I wasn't my body, it wasn't my age, and people were looking at me like I was this little pipsqueak. And yeah, my physical body was, but it was just I looked at the world in a totally different way, which
Mm.
led to a lot of defiance and behavior. But I see that as being very strong-willed and connected.
Absolutely.
Um, but my brain was very changed.
Mm.
After having this, experience, I was able to feel a sliver of light going through my brain while I
Mm.
was in school, and I was able to just connect to the heavenly realms, whenever. And I would go to the bathroom and have conversations with,
Yeah.
spirit and all this stuff. But there was one moment, and I write about this in Life After Breath, where I was able to see, spirits around the room. And I
Mm.
looked at a classmate and I said, "Do you see what I'm seeing?" They just looked at me like with this bewildered kind of look. And that was, again, when more of this air was taken out of me. And there's nothing in a way lower of feeling very isolated, as if the people that you viewed as adults in your life, people that you depended on, could understand you. And now all of a sudden you can't express yourself, and people can't even understand you if you tried. So it's a very lonely, isolated way. But I would just kind of like try to live my life, and things would just happen. I would see things, hear things, know things
Mm.
before they happen. And it wasn't like
Mm.
saying, "Oh my God, this is psychic." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is annoying. Let me just live my life."
Mm. Mm.
So,
And
but
at
yeah.
the same time, did you feel embraced by the unseen ones? I mean, you saw them, but everybody else didn't see them. Did you feel embraced? Because that was, for me, that was my only point of succor. I didn't have the trauma of the NDE that you had. I had my own level of trauma
Mm,
because I spoke about what I was seeing. In my innocence, I thought everybody could see what I was seeing.
mm,
And they were very disdainful. And on
mm,
one or two occasions, because I aggravated my teachers, very, very young. I mean, I'm talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because I couldn't do what they wanted me to do. So I couldn't read and I couldn't process math.
mm,
And so was claimed to be a dunce and was sent into the corner with a cone hat on my head and all sorts of things. Whereas the other children obviously saw me to be different, and
mm.
therefore they pulverized me with their difference. And the
Wow.
easiest thing for me to do was to go into mutism, which I did
Mm,
for 2 years. And
wow.
I know that that was my soul leading me into the experience of stillness,
Mm,
so that I could actually observe, not participate willfully, because I have a strong will, but to observe in stillness and therefore reconnect with the supernal, reconnect so that I could see Jacob's ladder between me and the spirit world much more easily. And of
mm,
course, they came to me and I could feel a way of shaping my perception so that those people over there were very dark in auric field, and they were the ones that I had to be careful of. Whereas
mm,
those people over there had these extraordinary pastel colors, and of course they were mostly women actually, and they were immensely loving and
mm,
kind, and fun and playful beings to be with, even though they were the adults. So I was able to discern.
mm,
So I'm just wondering, trying to find a way of relating to your extraordinary story,
mm.
if you were feeling the same thing about the spirit world. Did it help you through the assimilation process, which, as you're describing, was uncomfortable, beyond
Yeah.
uncomfortable, painful?
Yeah. I mean, just as like there was an incubational period when I crossed over and I needed to get used to it, so too was life after the NDE, where
Yes,
for
yes,
myself, I felt more comfortable over there than here.
yes, yes,
But there came a certain point where I knew, I had to just kind of relearn how to be human again,
mm,
in a way. Um, because the world in front of me was more in love with regurgitation over creativity and imagination.
yeah, yeah,
And to survive, I needed to have radical acceptance of that. It didn't mean that I agreed with it, but
yes,
that was the way that it was. And if I were to just continue doing this, I wouldn't be who I am today.
yes,
But
yes.
to thrive, I needed to make sense out of it at a certain point in my life.
Yes.
You know?
What wisdom you were given. And so I assume, therefore, the cultivation of patience, the cultivation of tolerance, the cultivation of compassion
Mm,
are inherent parts of that experience, because the wisdom that you had looking into the misbehavior, so to speak, or the psychodynamic of the adult behavior, which was apparently impure or lacking in credibility, was something that you had an appreciation of, which it takes time
mm,
in human terms to normally acquire that, which is around the 14, 15, 16-year-old period, when the third eye begins to open or doesn't, when we become more discerning, because we know we can't trust them, because
mm.
they say, trust me, and then they misbehave. And so it's all part of that assimilation process. So it's quite radical to lead you into that field of compassion.
Yes, it was a beautiful gift. But you and I share something where we had pain growing up in a way, and we were different. We could have easily just gotten bitter at life and not liked it, but we decided, to take the high road and to use this for the greater good, and
Yeah.
to be a miracle transformation. And
Mm,
I think if people understand that their pain isn't just meant for themselves, but to at times evolve from, relate to others,
mm.
create more pathways of empathy. I mean, pain could be a great pathway of developing the muscle of empathy and understanding. And that is a part of the healer's journey.
That's his vindication,
Yeah. Yeah. We're
isn't it?
living proof.
That's the reason why it's actually there, rather than to become consumed by just suffering, suffering, suffering. It actually is a vehicle to find our way back into spirit, and
Yeah,
therefore to recognize the vast intelligence of what we're being shown within the field of inclusivity.
absolutely. And we use the term NDEs almost as if they're like a separate entity. But I look at all these things as, to me, very similar, whether you're having a loss of a loved one or a crisis in life. It's a shake-up period of life where the ground that you're standing on, is just shooken up and you can't stand on it and you have to find a new foundation to live. But human beings are stubborn. If you look at animals, for instance, when their terrain is threatened, they don't just sit there in the famine. They go to a different pasture. They find a different way to live. And sometimes the universe needs to kind of shake up the terrain that we're living on so that we could live connected to the ultimate terrain
Yeah.
that we are truly connected to, and live a more beautiful, connected life. Yeah.
That's a beautiful quote.
Right.
I must draw that and share it with you. That's a beautiful quote. The ultimate terrain. Absolutely
Right.
amazing. So, we were going to go a little bit deeper. I mean, thank you so much for sharing, and also for tolerating my inquisitiveness,
I love it.
bringing us
Uh-oh.
into, I suppose, graphics, because I see everything very visually, and your level of articulation, your level of intelligent articulation about this extraordinary phenomenon is really beautiful and acute. I just wanted to go deeper into the graphics of, okay, so how can we imagine this with you so that we can be transported in the same vehicle that you were transported in, but in review of you and in awe of you, that
Mm,
you give us this glimpse of heaven, or indeed you show us the face of God, which is what we're all fundamentally wanting to see. Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. So bringing it to now and your work, Jacob's Ladder, the writing of, the wisdom of, and the teaching
mhm,
of has led you to a pathway of discovery that is very unique.
mm. Yes. Yeah. It is quite unique. And I love the just this symbology of it, the that happen. Life, it could be quite not comical, but it could be quite ironic and synchronistic if you if you take a step back. But the fact that I had this on a ladder in a playground, when you think of a
Yeah,
playground,
yeah.
I was just a child, and we think of a playground, we think of the playground of life. We're all just children in God's playground, here to nurture, take care, support, but to enjoy, to play, but to be one with each other. And I think we have to start to get back to that, but the ladder is connected to the ground and goes eternally to the heavens. And so hopefully each lifetime is a different rung, a different gear that we're connected to in this life. And I don't think our life is measured so much by what we experience, but rather the foundation that we're connected to. And when we're living a very connected life, we don't have to wait until we die to come to the afterlife. We're always connected to it. And from our essence, we generate that beautiful energy. And, and I think that's why people are attracted to certain vibrations, as they're just divine beings here on this planet. They're angels in human form. And I'm sure you've encountered these beings where they embody what the other side is about. The issue is
Mm,
we've inherited a lot of things that are very deviant or divergent from
mm,
that truth, and the power of belief is so influential in the lives that we live,
mm, mm,
unfortunately, you
mm,
know,
mm.
or fortunately. Yeah.
So in the quintessence of your core, what keeps you going, bearing in mind that we're looking into a world that is so divergent, and particularly at this time as we see the crumbling completion of an old order which no longer serves us. And many of the bastions of that order, the curators of that order, whether it be the corporatocracy or the field of politics, or indeed the field of education, are holding on tightly because they're fearful of the change. What keeps you going?
My gift, my NDE, that keeps me going. That is the meaning and purpose of my life.
Yeah.
Not to just to have this, but to give it to others and to
Hmm.
see the transformation. You know, um, I don't want to like promote movies, but there was one movie that touched me when I was a young kid, and it didn't get the quite the hype that I feel it deserved. But it was a movie called Big Fish. I don't know if you ever seen that movie, but
Yes.
but
Yeah.
but but to me, like you asked me what life is about. Like the man is about to. I don't want to give the whole movie over, but he's about to cross over.
Yeah.
But in the end, he sees everyone that he had an impact with. And
Yes.
at the funeral, they're able to see all the connected dots that this person, because of your existence, the world was a better place. And what better compliment you could give? But you understand that in this world, so many people are just about taking and accumulating. And the ultimate currency to me is the difference that you make in this life. And that's what keeps me going, is that person who's going through pain or suffering or anguish, and that person that I keep in mind, that keeps my pages going of my books. If it's just about me, I would just eat chicken wings all day and hang out on the couch, right?
No,
The
you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. I
but but
can't agree with
but
that image. I can't agree with
but
that
but
image.
but the
Not with
pain,
the environment in which you're placed. There are no chicken wings in that environment.
yeah, but the pain that people go through is
Yeah.
what keeps me going. That could keep you very bitter or just very paralyzed, or that could be your purpose, and that drives me. That
Yeah.
drives me crazy. I wake up every day knowing that there's someone else to help. There's another life to influence. There's another life to reach today.
Bless you. Bless you. And the quality of transference that you were describing, where you allow someone to transfer from the pain into the bliss body.
Mm,
What are the core ingredients of the tools that you use? I know you're using your heart consciousness, which evidently is at the core of the or the assimilation process from near death to near life.
mm, mm.
Um, what are the core principles that you're using, or the core tools?
Well, I think really it's people learning how to get quiet, because the quieter you get, the more you could feel, the more you could hear as well. So many of us are caught up in the chatter of our brains and our analysis and our pathology. And I think it's helping people to understand that a negative mind will not contribute to a positive life, and
Mm,
really helping people get into that deeper connectivity of life itself. And so meditation is something that I do. I do a lot of guided meditation, hypnotherapy, but particularly a lot of heart opening,
mm,
and l-
mm,
you know, I've been the biggest skeptic of my NDE, but a decade or two later, I had this profound OBE, and this out of body experience lasted several weeks. But it just was like something that happened in my adult life that I just kind of needed that, just understanding that this is real. Even in like my adult, like left brain side, I had this profound spiritual transformative out of
mhm,
body experience. And in that experience, much like the work that you're all about, I really was able to connect to the love inside of me, all around in me, but more importantly, the deep voice that emanated not from my vocal cords, but from
mm.
a deeper part of my being. And I work very similar to you, where it's so many people have life writing their stories and not their own voice writing it. And when people are able to really be the voice of their stories, the chapters are so incredibly altered moving forward, from that
Beautiful,
simple shift, you know.
beautiful line. Thank you for your poetry. Beautiful lines here. And so, oh, I had a question out of that, which was really quite crucial. Um, I got caught up in your poetry, you see.
A
And s-
Jacob Frost, yeah, no.
and so you're taking us deeper and deeper and deeper into your love
Mm.
and the love that was shared with you. Oh, yes, I know. Definition, please, just in case anybody out there is thinking, what's an OBE?
Yes, yes, yes. And my apologies to viewers. OBE is O is out, B is body, E is experience. So essentially, when you have an out of body experience, you are able to feel yourself leave your body, and this could occur for short periods of time, longer period of time. Sometimes it could be induced by various, factors, but you just recognize that there is a you beyond this body. There's a you beyond this you. And to me, it's an expansive experience of your true form and true energy beyond, just being in this finite body and structure, that
Yeah,
you're limitless and you're boundless, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
And
Beautiful,
it's a
beautiful.
direct experience of it. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And may I ask, what stimulated the OBE?
It's hard to like pinpoint and say, oh, I just think it's kind of like a shell and a lobster, like you're living life a certain way, and then eventually you just are able to let go of that old shell and come into a new. And
Hmm.
that's what happened to me. I mean, I know I was doing a lot of sincerity practices and, Buddhist bows and, building up a lot of my energy, but it just, one day it just kind of happened. And
Hmm.
that's how all transformation happens. Like, yes, you want to put in good foundation of work, but
Hmm.
it's process oriented, it's journey oriented. It's not focused on the results. It's not like you do X, X, and X, you'll get Y. No, it will come to you when it's ready. As the teacher will come to you, life will come to you, but you have to be in a position to receive, not try to force.
Yeah. And for me, the crux of what you're sharing with us is the difference between the idea and the experience.
Yes, yes. Spirituality to me is about a lot about the direct experience of all these things, and it speaks to
What
you.
else is there? I mean, I believe that that's the conundrum, isn't it? Right at the very core, that we're led as spirit in matter, and
Mm,
the matter overweights us, and
mm,
the perceptual filters become clouded in
mhm,
the sense of recognizing the fullness of what we're truly living, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And what your story has done is to take us into the glory and the reverence and the
mhm,
adoration of how just before us, just within us, is this doorway
mm,
through experience, direct experience, whether it be out of body or near death, or indeed by conjuring it because of our love for the divine, our reverence for the divine, so that we can be transported. And I feel that, if I may say, that's my perception of what Jacob's Ladder is really all about, and that the spiraling nature of the ladder is really human DNA, the double helix DNA,
mm,
which we know was probably during the early part of Genesis and the remarkable story of Jacob and his brother that was informative at that time because of the downloading of human spirit into the density of matter. And
mm,
now we're climbing back up the ladder, and there are going to be several ladders to heaven.
mm.
And certainly your teaching is one of them. So we unfortunately have come to the end of our time, but I just want to say thank you so much for sharing from your generous heart this extraordinary story and your experience and the way that you've learned to articulate it. It's really, really quite extraordinary. So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. And I'm sure that Ryan will put your website up on the screen. There we are. You see. Well done. Thank you, Ryan. Jacob L. Cooper. I really do ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to please go and visit Jacob, because his website is really sensational, and you'll be able to see all of the different aspects of his skill set and how they become experientialized, which is the most important thing. So, Jacob, on behalf of everybody, thank you. Namaste, namaste.
Oh, thank
And
you. Thank you.
all you wonderful people, I haven't called you out by name, but Michael, Kim, Sylvia, Melinda, Tanaz, all these wonderful people, some of whom I know, some of whom,
Mm.
Stacy, Melody, Blessed by the Best. Oh, I love it. And are there any names here? Stewart Pearce, somebody. GD, thank you for being with us. And don't forget that this time next Monday, there will be another remarkable male soul steward. So, Ryan, thank you. Please stay where you are, Jacob. And thank you, Ryan. We'll close down.